Thank you very much for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about Business Insights Explorer with a little more detail than we did last time. So we talked about Business Insights Explorer as an inquiry tool where we're able to pull data from data views that are defined for each module. We talked about how to delete and define columns and how to add calculated columns and how to filter data. And we talked about how easy it is to export data to either text files or Excel from Business Insights Explorer. The one thing that we didn't talk about and didn't demonstrate is how Business Insights Explorer can be used as a reporting tool, which allows us to group data with subtotals, which is going to be our topic today. So let's take a look at our agenda. So we're going to choose a data view and change some settings, and then we're going to take a look at Business Insights Explorer as a reporting tool by using the customer history invoice view and the vendor history invoice view. So let's go ahead and get started. So here we are in Sage 100, and I'm going to go to Accounts Receivable, Explore, and we're going to use the customer history invoices view. Now notice that when I go into this view that there's no data being displayed. And as we covered last time, this is based on a setting that I recommend, which is to not automatically load the data. Just as a refresher, the way you see that is to go into Tools, Options, go to the Data tab, and deselect the option to automatically load data when view setting is loaded or changed. And the reason we recommend that is it can take a significant amount of time to load large data sets. And this is unnecessary and is a problem if in fact you're going to filter that data anyway. Because if you're going to filter the data, it's much faster to filter the data and then load it than to load everything and then filter the data. So I just want you to get used to the fact that when you go into these screens, there may not be any data there. The other thing we talked about last time is that you can add columns, move the columns around, those kinds of things. So let's go ahead and refresh the data to pull the data up from this view. Now we're going to take a look at the left part of this screen, which lets us choose what data is going to be displayed in this secondary grid called the preview grid. And what we have here are the history invoices items. So I'll choose preview, and you can see that we have the history invoice items, and there are other options as well. Now what this means is, as I select each of these invoices, basically I'm able to see the header information of the invoice in the primary grid here, and the detail of the invoice in the preview grid. So in the data view grid, I'm seeing all of the information that's on the header of the invoice, and then the preview grid, I'm seeing whatever I've chosen to look at here. In this case, the invoice items. So as I click through each one of these, I can then see the item invoice detail. Now what we're going to do is if I want to drill into the detail, I can right mouse click from the preview grid and choose drill into preview. And what that will do is take that detail and move it into the main section or the data view grid. Let me go back, refresh again, because there is another option, which is to right mouse click and open preview. And when I do that, there is no filter. So now I'm looking at every line of every invoice in invoice history. Again, with large data sets, this could be problematic. So if you want to do this, you want to make sure that you have a filter and that you filter this before you hit the refresh so that you don't get all of the data here. But let's talk about what we can do with this data. So now we're looking at the line detail of the invoices. Now maybe what I want to do here is see the customer for each of these invoices. So what I'm going to do is go to any column, doesn't matter which one, I'm going to right mouse click and go to column settings and then choose add. And what you're going to see here is the capability of adding any column from either the detail table for invoice history or the header table. Well, the customer is on the header table, so I'll just hit the plus sign find my customer number, and I'll add that. And let's bring it over to the left here. Now I can also add the invoice number or other attributes. But the other attribute I want to add, just for sake of argument here, is I want to add the transaction date from the header or the posting date, and I'll format that as a date field. And once again, I can pull that over. So as you can see here, I can add any column from the header, and once I've added the column from the header, that column can now be used in filtering. So in my example here, I don't really want to pull in every line of every invoice since the beginning of time. I'm probably am going to want to filter this data based on the transaction date. So I want to add that column. Now in my test system here, there's not a lot of data involved. So we're going to go ahead and just use all of the data. So now what we have is a list that shows the customer number, the transaction date, and then the item code, etc. But now this is where the reporting functionality comes in. Let's say that I just want to know the total sales by customer. And again, imagine if you filtered this data for a particular month or a particular quarter or a particular year. But grouping the data so that you can subtotal is extremely easy. All you do is take whatever the field is that you want to group by and drag it into this gray area up above. And now, as you can see, I have all of my invoice lines for the customer ABF, all of my invoice lines for customer AVNET, etc. Now I'm going to look at the column labeled extension, and I'm going to come down and you can see that there's nothing here. Well, there's a couple of buttons up at the top. One allows you to do a summary footer, which is a grand total, and the other is a group summary footer, which is a summary based on the group. So I'm going to turn that on, come down to the extension, go to that section, right mouse click and choose sum. And now you can see the total amount of the invoice or the invoice totals for each of the customers in this date range, again, assuming that I filtered by date range. So I can also add a grand total here as well. Now, if I don't want to see this detail, I can hit the little minus sign next to the header, and that will compress it as I do like this. Now, the problem is, as I compress it, I don't see those subtotals anymore. Well, there's an option to turn that on. So if I do that, and I right mouse click and go to group summary footer and say always visible, then even though I suppress them, I can see the subtotals for each of those customers. And let's go ahead and expand all. Now, the other thing we can do with grouping is you can do multiple groupings, and this is where Business Insights Explorer gets to be really cool. So let's say I wanted to know my total sales by customer and by item. So I'm just going to drag item code up underneath customer number. So there's my customer ABF with the item code /200.-DA. Let's look at this one down here, item code. This is an inventory item, and I can see for this customer, I sold that amount for that item, and then I can go on to the other customers. Now, what's really cool about this is now I'm looking at the subtotals by customer, by item, but what if I want to look at it by item, by customer? Well, all I have to do is now drag the customer number group under the item code, and it resorts, regroups, resubtotals in real time. So this is the power of Business Insights Explorer reporting, in my opinion, is to be able to see this data any way that you like in whatever group order that you want to see it. So now we can see for that particular item that we were looking at before, here's the item, and now we know for that customer we sold $1116.99, which is the same number we looked at before, but now for the different customers, $781, etc. So it's the same data, just grouped a different way without having to write a crystal report, without having to know anything about report writing or anything like that. Now let's go ahead and save this. As we talked about last time, I'll save this as a public setting by item and customer. So how do I get back to it? Well, I go back into the view. and I look at my settings and there's nothing there. So until I drill in or open the preview, and then I can go to the setting and see that, because that setting is associated with the opening of the preview, and then I can just refresh and there's the data we just looked at. One other quick example, same kind of thing in accounts payable, except in this case it's the vendor history invoices view. I'm going to go ahead and pull that up and right mouse click in the preview section, say open preview, and go ahead and let that pull in. Again, ostensibly I would pull header information into the detail and to be able to filter by it, like invoice date or vendor, those kinds of things. The only thing I wanted to show you in this one, just like the last one, maybe I want to know what we spent by GL account number. So I'm just going to go ahead and group by account number. And for the extension, I'm going to turn on my group footer, right mouse click, and you can see you have other options here. Maybe you just want to know how many there are. Just say sum, and now I know the amounts for each of the GL account numbers. So as a review, we chose our data view, history invoices for both accounts receivable and accounts payable. We looked at changing our settings, and then we looked how we can use Business Insights Explorer as a reporting tool by drilling into that detail or previewing that detail, and then adding groups by column and adding subtotals. Please subscribe to our channel and our user group. Our website is www.nimsassociates.com. You can always send us an email at erp@nimsassociates.com or call 877-454-3200, extension 6346. Thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it.